Hello everyone, and welcome to a video about how to engage in enduring reading strategies. In this article, we're looking at talking about students, and we're talking about sleep, but we're also talking about how high schools can have a say in this. And so when I look through this, it's from the Globe and Mail, and it's talking a lot about that we as teachers and educators and school boards around the province and across the country should be having our students start school later than we actually do. And what they're saying is that some school boards are experimenting with this because they've seen that, based on the research, students definitely sleep differently than adults do. And so what they're really concerned about, though, is the idea of academic progress right here and mental health. And so as I'm reading through this, I'm thinking about my students, and I'm thinking about that when I teach first period in the morning, that my students are very, very sleepy. But I'm also thinking about that I have kids of my own, and I'm thinking about that what is it going to be like when they are teenagers? And so I'm thinking about the idea of sleep. I'm also thinking about myself because I know that for me, I also don't get enough sleep. And so if this is something that's happening when people are younger, then it's going to become something that's going to be a very, very big issue if it's not already within our society. And so, one of the things they're talking about, though, is that high schools in particular start too early in the morning. So, they're talking about recommending later bell times and that people are actually doing real research into this. So, they're talking about school boards in Northwestern Ontario that are experimenting with this. And they're talking about that even something simple like an hour makes a major difference. And so, with that, they were talking about that in northern Ontario, it makes a lot of sense because many of the schools are very far away geographically, and so it makes sense that they start their schools later. But within that, they're also finding that they're having more success academically. And so, with this, I'm thinking about the idea that where I teach, we don't have that particular issue, but I think about that if we started an hour later, what kinds of great work could be happening in our classrooms because students are more well rested. And then when I look at this, I'm also looking at that and thinking about that they're talking about that students are experiencing this in terms of academic performance, obesity, and mental illness. So it's really interesting that this has become a global issue. So it's not just a Canadian issue that's being explored here. It's that it is an issue for everybody across the world. And so I'm thinking about that. I'm also thinking about that this is a Canadian, that people in Canada are actually trying to research this. McGill is a very well-known university here. And really what they're trying to think about is that when you look at the actual studies, 8:43 a.m., you would want to be thinking about here that your school starts at whatever time it does. My school starts at 8 a.m. And so for a lot of my high school students that I teach, 8 a.m. is a super, super early morning for me too, as well. But what is interesting is that it talks about from students age 10 to 18, if they have a 10-minute delay in starting their school time, they get 3 more minutes of sleep. So if my school started at 8:10, my students would get 3 more minutes of sleep. And that's interesting. And so I would question, as one of the strategies is 3 more minutes really important and effective for when it comes to helping academic performance and preventing obesity and helping with mental illness? Um, and when I think about this, I think about maybe 3 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but maybe it has major impact on our students. And so I'm curious about that as well. And when I look at this, also, then I'm thinking about and reflecting on here, it's talking about the Toronto District School Board having ran a 2-year project with classes starting at 10 a.m. And for me, I'm super curious about the idea, what would student learning look like if it happened at 10 a.m.? And I think about, like, for me, if I was in that case, and thinking about when I was a student, which is a long time ago, what would it have been like for me to start at 10 a.m.? My school day when I was in high school started at 9 a.m., which was pretty early. But if you are somebody who's engaging in extracurriculars like I was at the school at 7 a.m. And so that meant I was getting up at 5:30 or 6 o'clock every morning. I think my academic performance as a person would have been, as a learner, would have been stronger had I been able to get more sleep. It's interesting too. Here they're talking very much across the province. They mentioned Northern Ontario earlier on in the article. Then they're talking about Toronto District School Board. Now they're talking about London, Thames Valley District School Board. And so here, I'm paying attention to that they're talking about this is a provincial issue. And I'm reflecting on that this is something that's not just happening in a pocket somewhere, that this is being discussed on a provincial level. And so that is very interesting to me. And I'm reflecting on that perhaps this is something that is going to become a reality. And in many ways, with the research pointing to the fact that schools actually start too early in the morning, I'm excited to think that perhaps this is something that could really improve student learning. And so with that, when I think about all of these things, when I engage in these strategies, as I'm reading, I can really be extending the idea to, I can be thinking about it from a personal perspective, but then also thinking about what it means for other people, and then what it means on a more global scale. And so all of that helped me to have more of a conceptualization of the idea that the research is pointing to the fact that schools are starting too early, and unfortunately, it's having negative effects on student learning. And so when I think about this, then I'm thinking about, well, what do we need to be doing and how can we actually change this? And so it's making my brain go in those directions. Thank you.